Am I allowed to see the camera? Are you on it today instead of me? You probably have more to say, wouldn't you? Right, come here. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin, and today I wanted to talk about how I kind of learnt about living frugally from being a student. And I feel like a lot of the lessons I learned about frugal living came from that time of my life, and it kind of taught me a lot about budgeting. And where are you going? I obviously think of uni as well as like a kind of thing of privilege. Like, I was lucky I got to go, and I know that it's kind of like, it feels almost not like the real adult world, and it's like a little introduction to it without all the responsibilities of being an adult. So I'm aware of that too. I just feel like I learned a lot of lessons about living frugally that I still use in my life now at that time. So I just wanted to share that with you. And yeah, I've just been thinking about this, and it actually, like, it feels so long ago now. It kind of is. But obviously when I went to university, like, it was at a different time and things were cheaper than they are now, so not all of this applies to now, but I just feel like there's a lot of lessons I've taken from it. So yeah, the first thing that I was going to say was, when I went to university for the first year, I lived in halls. I went to university away from home, so I had to stay there obviously, and the halls I lived in were not very nice. They were, I'm sure most student halls aren't that nice, but I remember going to visit my sister in hers and thinking hers were like luxurious compared to ours, because it wasn't just like the mess. Well, it was. I think the fact that there were so many people living in one flat, I think that was what made it so gross. Kind of like, I was living with, I think it was 11 people in a flat, and most of them were guys, and we had one toilet between all of us, and nobody cleaned, so you can kind of imagine what it would have been like. And the dishes situation was horrendous in the kitchen. Like, I remember stacks of dishes with crusted food stuck on them, and you couldn't even get into the sink because it was overflowing, and there were bugs crawling around and stuff, so it wasn't the most pleasant place to live. And then in second year I moved out into a flat, and that was where I kind of remained. And yeah, like, I was on quite a tight budget while I was in uni, like, for all expenses, like, apart from bills obviously, like for food and going out and anything that I needed, books, like anything for clothes wise or transport, and just anything you can think of like that. I had £200 a month, so it was £50 a week. And at the time I had a boyfriend, and we tried to always eat together to kind of save money, and we would do our food shopping together, and we spent £25 each a week on food, which left £25 a week obviously for everything else. And now I can't really imagine how I made that work. I know it's different because I have 2 kids now, but it just seems like so little. But I know everything's got so expensive since then too, and it wasn't really the same then, because I can remember going out for like a special occasion for dinner, and like, we could get like a 3-course meal for like £10. So it just felt like things were simpler, and kind of like, it was just easier to do more with less money. And now, like, I still think you can, but it's just about planning ahead and being creative, and looking for all the free things you can find, and events and things that people are giving away, and like, just, I'm always thinking ahead basically whenever I'm budgeting. So I think the main things with university that I kind of learnt about were food budgeting, because I'd never had to do that before. Obviously living at home, I wasn't in charge of that, and I had just come out of school and gone straight to uni, so that was like a lesson for me in that. We ate a lot of the same meals like all the time, so like, all I remember eating over and over again were like chicken in like a jar of curry sauce with rice and peppers in it, or what was the other thing we had all the time? Oh, those stir-in pots with pasta, so there wouldn't necessarily be any meat, or we might put chicken in it, but I feel like we just lived on chicken. like didn't really buy any other meat, maybe mince sometimes. Lunches were really simple, like things like toast with like, you know, the tins of sardines spread on it. I remember buying the packets of chicken noodle soup and making up a big batch of it. I also kind of lived on sub of the days, because at that point you could get the sub of the day for £2, which we did it all the time, and everyone I knew at uni seemed to do it a lot. And I wouldn't buy extras, I'd just get the sandwich, take it home and have a cup of tea. I remember walking like to do the food shopping and carrying all the bags back, and that really sucked because there's a lot of hills in Glasgow, and it felt like we were always walking back to halls or back to the flat uphill with a lot of bags, and you just had to deal with it basically. There were buses and things, but we just didn't use them that often. Like, I feel like I didn't think to. Like, I would have used it maybe if I was going into town sometimes, but for day-to-day stuff I always walked everywhere. We were about 2 miles in halls from the university and walked there and back every day, which it's like a healthier lifestyle, I think, and I liked that I wasn't relying on transport and I didn't have a car to think about. And I'm glad I didn't have a car there, because the parking situation would have been a nightmare, and it just felt like things were simple. I would have like decorated with things in a kind of like DIY way, like, and I still feel like I do that. Like, I don't really have any DIY skills, but I love to make my space pretty with simple things that don't cost a lot. Like, I would have decorated my walls or notice board with like my own drawings, clippings from magazines, like postcards that I maybe picked up from a museum, and they were like 20p or whatever. Posters, I would have put posters on the wall just with like, we actually weren't allowed to use blue tack, so I remember everybody using drawing pins to put their posters on the walls. We weren't allowed to stick anything up, so then at the end of the year, to hide that we had put drawing pins into the walls, people would put like toothpaste in the holes, which was kind of ridiculous, but it's just like a funny memory of uni. And I sort of wondered, did they do that every single year, and did anybody ever discover the like layers of toothpaste shoved into the walls? I didn't really buy clothes often. If I did, it was always in the sale. Like, I'd wait till the January sale after Christmas and buy a few things that I needed and kind of wear things to death. I would buy a lot of secondhand stuff. I loved charity shops then as well. I just remember going to like vintage shops, and at that time there were a lot of really special pieces from like the 60s and 70s that were like £5 each, and I would wear them to death. And I do feel like in uni, as time went on, my weakness was buying clothes. Like, that was always the thing I ended up spending my money on. Or if I went home to visit, I would go to my favourite clothes shop, which is called Liberty Blue, and kind of stock up. But I didn't really spend a lot on other things. I remember us having drinks at friends' houses, like in friends' flats or in halls, and people would drink as much as they wanted to basically before going out, so they didn't have to pay for it when they were out, so it would be cheaper. I always did like my own hair, my own nails, which I still do. There were times later where I was like maybe going to the hairdresser, but in the earlier points of uni I always would have done that stuff myself. Hair was always really long, so I didn't get it cut that often. We would walk into town. I did get the bus sometimes. Like, later in uni I joined a band and I had cymbals and stuff to carry, so I would have got the bus into town for that. But it wasn't expensive. Like, I can't even remember how much it was. It was probably like £1.80 or something, and you just threw the change in the little collector thing. I remember going shopping for like one small thing. Like, there was a shop called Fop that did music and books, and they were really cheap, and you would get something from there and feel really rich and excited about it. I also remember a little music shop in a lane. It closed down and I was really sad about it, but that was where I discovered some of my favourite music that I still love now. And there was a man who worked there who was so passionate about music, and he loved like sharing his ideas and thoughts about it, and he recommended some stuff to me, and I just loved spending time there. It had a really nice atmosphere and I was sad to see it go. I do remember buying, like, as a treat for myself, I would have most often bought like a £2 book, which you could get new in Fop, and I was really into things like Charles Bukowski at that time, and you could get those really easily. And then or I'd get like a CD. I remember some people getting like records. They didn't have a record player at the time, but they got them as like decoration for their rooms, because at that time you could kind of find them cheaply, and just for like the cover art. But I did later on get a record player and started collecting records while I was living there, so I still have them now. So yeah, I remember a lot of walking about, looking, not buying a lot, but just kind of walking and shopping for the experience. And there were a lot of like independent shops that had a nice vibe to them, and it felt like an experience in itself, just walking around, trying things on, looking and seeing what there was, and not necessarily having to act on every like buying impulse that you had, because you couldn't really, you had to be careful. And I remember, like, if I think back to uni, like the thing I spent the most time doing out of anything was listening to music, and I listened to music on its own as an activity. I've always loved music, and like I just spend so much time listening to music now too. But at that point I remember a lot of sitting around, smoking probably, and listening to albums, and just feeling like that was enough. And I feel like that was before the stage where internet took over to the full extent it has now, because although we had it, I remember not having it on my phone and just having texts and phone calls. So your phone was only for communication with people and for arranging meetups and things like that. It wasn't like devouring your entire day. And what else? I would have spent a lot of time reading books. Sorry, potatoes in the background, but I'm sure you're used to that, plus the dryer's going. Yeah, we had to read a lot of books for uni. I did philosophy in first year as well as French. I did comparative literature, which was a bit like English, so there was a lot of reading material. I don't think this is yours. No. How did you get that? Anyway, and yeah, we had to study texts, take detailed notes, and then you would have to go to the library to get like do background reading and get quotes and references for essays. So that took up a lot of time, and I feel like sometimes when you're immersed in stuff like that, you don't even think of spending money because your thoughts are elsewhere. And I feel like now, the more I get involved in writing or painting and doing productive things or cleaning the house, organising, like I don't even think about spending. It's not an urge I have to fight, and I feel like that was true at that time as well. There was a uni library which we could use for free, and a lot of people in uni spent a huge amount of time there. I didn't really tend to. I would have gone and got books out and brought them home and studied there, because I just didn't love the feel of the place. There was something a bit spooky about it to me, and the French, which was my main subject, the floor for it was on the 9th floor, and it was very like, it kind of felt like a wind tunnel, but it also felt like the floor was made of paper, and there was just something a bit eerie about it, and I didn't like working in those little kind of cubicle things, so I always took mine home. Or if you weren't allowed to, you could photocopy stuff. I was a member of the uni gym for a while, and we had a big discount. It really wasn't much at all to go, and I would have gone running there quite a lot. It's kind of ironic because I used to walk to the gym, smoke on the way there, run for like 20 minutes, and then walk home, smoking on the way home. So it was probably undoing all of the good effects of it, but it was still like enjoyable. Well, I don't know if I'd ever describe running as enjoyable, but I felt good after it, and I still feel that way about it actually. There was like a free museum with art galleries and stuff, and we would have gone there a lot. I've spent tons of time there, and I probably had every exhibition memorised. There was a little tea house that I love to go to. It's still there, and I took the girls the last time we were there, and it just was a whole drawn out experience. It was the type of place where it felt like time stopped when you're there. It still does feel like that. It never felt like anybody was rushing you out. You would get like a pot of tea. It would be a few pounds, and you could sit for hours and chat. I remember people doing like open mic nights there and things, but I kind of spent more time there in the afternoon and would have met up with friends and had a really long chat, and just, I remember people studying there too sometimes. There was another coffee shop across from my flat where I lived in second year, and it had a nice atmosphere. I liked it. Apparently Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins liked to go there. It's not there anymore sadly, but yeah, actually I saw the Smashing Pumpkins play whenever I was in Glasgow, and a few other bands, because I felt like music was a huge part of life there, between listening to music, collecting music, the number of music shops there were around, people sharing music with each other. Plus there were like, you know, like the typical karaoke nights at like the student unions. And I just remember people playing music a lot for entertainment. Like my boyfriend at the time played guitar, and a lot of my friends were into music, and there were a lot of gigs, even smaller scale ones, and that was what people spent a lot of their time doing. There was also a bar around the corner from my flat called the 78, which is also still there. I loved it because my best friend and I used to go there all the time and have coffee and cake, and you'd get this huge slice of cake. They were made by a French lady, and they were like the best cakes I've ever had. They were so moist and delicious, and there was like a cake of the day every day, and you would get that for like £2, so it was really affordable. And then there was like a dub and grub night. We would usually go and not eat dinner, but like just go for the dub, so it was like free apart from whatever drinks you were having, and we would just buy like £2 drinks. And it was just about music and hanging out and having fun. And then there was a jazz night as well, where they had live jazz, and it was the same kind of thing, so it just had a really nice atmosphere. And I just feel like when I look back on uni, there were times that were hard, there were times where I felt really alone and lonely. Like there were breakups and things, there were different phases of friendships, and like it was a time for kind of like a lot of growth, and I don't really feel like it was an easy time, like emotionally for me. But I think it taught me a lot about living independently, managing my finances, making the most out of very little, being creative. And yeah, I just wanted to share some of that with you and kind of give you a little taste of it, and hopefully this is helpful to somebody. And yeah, I just kind of like to reconnect with myself from that time whenever I'm thinking about budgeting, and remember all of the simple things that I did, and the fact that like you don't have to overcomplicate things in life. Listening to an album on its own can be a worthy activity. So yeah, I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. Oh, I'll show you these quickly. I took my kids to a workshop this morning where they did edible flowers, and they decorated cookies with icing. They coloured the icing with the flowers soaked in water or something, and then they put the petals and flowers on top. Yeah, they really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it too because I sat in the cafe and I actually wrote 2,000 words for a change, which I used to do every day and haven't as much recently. And I got a lot of my book read, so I've nearly finished it, and actually ordered a copy of it, because like a used copy, because I just loved that book so much. That it's called Sorrow and Bliss, and I mentioned it yesterday. It's like the best book ever to me. I don't know why, but it just completely sums up my view of the world, and I'll definitely reread it. So I wanted to have my own copy so I could like underline stuff and make notes and really study it. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will make another video soon, and have a great day. Bye.